not getting to the PVA because the PVA is buried under this little surface coat I've got. And if I was trying to lay this up without that surface coat, I'd be digging into the PVA probably, and that would jeopardize the release in the part. So not only is the surface coat cosmetic, it allows you to lay up the part like this without breaking the PVA, because on this little part there's a lot of poking around to get this thing packed in there tight. So there's 3 times around the mold, and I come back and I usually end it where I started. Or I don't usually, I always do. So come back here and I split it, go around the post one last time there, take it out here again, pack that in. And another thing I'm going to do here in a minute, there's some little voids around here where, you know, the carbon doesn't fill the mold exactly. I go through there and add chopped carbon. And you can see where it really doesn't want to stay in the mold. So don't worry about that right now, as long as you've got it predominantly in there. Don't be afraid to really push hard either. Take your fingers and work that toe down in there, and you'll see the resin bubble up. The resin will come out. Sometimes you'll feel air bubbles and voids come out, and you can also squeegee, you know, like this, lengthwise. So work this stuff, and you can tell by feeling it, you know, if it's really getting wet or dry. And don't be afraid to put pressure on it. That's where your strength is going to come. You want to get a lot of carbon in there, it packed in that mold. So I've got a lot packed in there, but there's like little voids right up here. But there's a lot going around the pin, so that's good. I got all this, which is where your strength comes from. So then I go through here and add a little bit of chop. And just a little pinch there. I put a little chop there, a little there. Now even though this is chop, it's 3/16, maybe an eighth, I don't know. Even though it's smaller, it's still adding strength. So there is no resin-rich areas. It's just some areas have shorter carbon, like these little voids, and down in that, around the bearing where the recess is in the mold, that's chop, just to fill up the button. But it's pretty much all carbon in this mold, not any filler, just 100% carbon. And sometimes with the chop, try to utilize the squeeze out around these poles as the wetting epoxy for this chop. So this chop will end up sucking up some of this extra resin. So you don't have to add more. You might, depending on how dry you get it, but if it is a little full and you see just a little squeeze out, don't worry, because you put this chop in there, chop fibers, and that stuff will suck it up really nice. So you can see how it's really packing good now. It's starting to lay down. And the other thing the chop does here is this chop, it sort of interweaves in these long strands, and it holds it from popping out. You can see that resin come up right there. You know, you can go in here, just put a little bit more chopped carbon, around that hub. And then I'm going to push down some more, let that resin wick out, wet that chopped carbon up. So this is the 815 HT 386, and the 386 is 33% per hundredweight, so it gives you a really thin resin. I made one earlier, a video today. It was a HTR 250 with the 386, and that's a thicker resin, higher viscosity. It's more like a resin you'd glass the center section of the wing, or make a wheel pant. But this little part here had so many nooks and crannies, and it needed so much carbon. I had to go with a really low viscosity resin. And the beauty of this resin also is it'll start to get a little bit thicker about this time. I've been laying it up for 15 minutes. And 16 minutes, it'll start to thicken a little bit to where it doesn't want to pop out. It starts to get thicker, and then it'll hold itself in the mold a lot better. So now I'm really packing it tight, and you try to pack it in there with your thumbs. If you can get this thing packed in there tight without the top plate doing the packing for you, you're better. All the top plate does is just sort of flatten everything out. So you try to get your compression with your fingers, and you can sort of hear, that when you push a void out, and you can feel it. If you put your fingers there and you push, you can feel little air bubbles come out. And then you can feel the fiber move and conform down in the mold. So as you're looking at it now, it's pretty much down in there as tight as it's going to get. Okay. And there's one thing I do, the last thing, and I used to do this, it seemed you try to get it as dry as you can, but what I do is put a little bit here, and that was just a real quick squeeze out to give you a flat surface. And then I immediately put the plate on. And what I just poured on there ends up flowing out anyway. So that gave you a good surface on the other side, the bottom.